Hey guys, welcome to HipHughes History as we hit you up with the election of 1872. Ulysses S. Grant wants another 4 years. We're going to create a new political party to run a candidate, and then poof, it's going to be gone. The Democrats not even going to have their own candidate. It's cray-cray in 1872. So let's take a look at the election. We'll take a look at the campaign, the results. It's going to be a ball. Giddy up for the learning, guys. Let's go get her done right now. It's not all kumbaya on the land of the Republican Party. Now, Ulysses S. Grant's gonna get the nomination. They are having a problem, though. There's a scandal that's a brewing. It's called the Credit Mobilier scandal, and it involves money that's coming from the railroad companies, the Union Pacific, into the pockets of a lot of politicians that occupy the administration, and they're getting favors, and it's not good. So one of the politicians involved in that we know of at that point is going to be Schuler Colfax, the former Speaker of the House and now Vice President. So Grant, has to kind of get rid of that problem. So he's going to kick him off the ticket and take Henry Wilson with him. But the Grant administration is really running on their record. They're running on the history of the Civil War, that, Grant won the Civil War, we freed blacks, now we have to keep those gains with military occupation of the South. That it's too early to leave the power of those local and state governments in the hands of ex-Confederates, that the federal government has to keep doing things like passing laws to enforce the 13th, the 14th, and 15th Amendment. And then, of course, they have Republican stuff on that platform as well, cutting taxes, subsidies to business in terms of the railroad and growing it. They do talk about civil service reform. They want to reduce the debt. They want to keep peace in the world. They want to get rid of patronage. So there's a lot of fluff in there, but at the end of the day, they're really talking about continuing the policies of the Grant administration with military reconstruction down south. But not all Republicans are thrilled about this. Certainly not what we call classical or liberal Republicans. Republicans that believe in the Constitution and the structure that was set up in the original Constitution, which doesn't include military occupation of local and state governments. So some of those folks, including Charles Francis Adams, yep, same family, it's the Adams family. It's John Adams' grandson, John Quincy Adams' son, and Francis Adams, and many like him in the Republican Party are looking at the door and they're thinking, we have to get away from this political party that is just growing the federal government too much. So they're going to meet, they're going to talk a little bit, they're going to make some decisions. Why don't we find out about that before we head over to the Democrats? Here we go. So in 1870, the Liberal Republican Party was formed, and in 1872, they're having their first and their only national convention, and they're trying to nominate Charles Francis Adams, but there's not enough support. There's a little bit of worry that he's not going to attract Western votes and immigrant votes, so they end up kind of deciding they're going to go with a guy by the name of Horace Greeley. Horace Greeley, who is the editor of the New York Herald. And the New York Herald, it was said, they had a weekly distribution circulation that went around the country, and they said it was the second most popular read after the Bible. So Horace has been influencing public opinion for decades in the United States, and that's going to be good for him, but it's also going to be bad for him because he said a lot of things. Now, he is a classical Republican. He was actually very close with the radical Republicans. He supported Lincoln. He supported emancipation before Lincoln supported emancipation. He supports the 13th, the 14th, and 15th Amendment. He supports equal rights and liberty and all of the things that the radical Republicans are saying, but when it comes to military occupation, he's saying that this is a bridge too far, that this violates the Constitution. He's a classical liberal Republican going back to the Constitution. So he's going to end up getting the nomination. He's taking a guy by the name of Benjamin Brown with him, but at the end of the day, their platform simply is that Reconstruction is over, that we need amnesty for ex-Confederates so they can participate once again in the Republic. We still support black rights, but it needs to be local self-government that does that, not the federal government. We need to get the military out of the South, which they see as supporting corrupt Republican regimes. They really believe that there's a problem with all of the corruption that's going on in the Grant administration, so they're also talking about hardcore civil service reform, that we need to get patronage and all of this greed and, monkey business out of the White House. So that's their candidate. They think they have a shot at this. Now we're going to take a look at the Democrats. What are they going to do in all of this chaos? So the Democratic Party meets and they have to make a decision whether they're going to nominate a candidate and somebody who might split the anti-Grant vote. Horace is already going to get a lot of votes from people that can't stand Grant. So if they nominate a candidate, they're going to split that vote and Grant's going to probably win. So they bite their tongues and they're going to nominate as their candidate also Horace Greeley. And they're even going to adopt the liberal Republican platform, which calls for equal treatment of African Americans and citizenship and all of this jazz. It was called the New Departure Strategy. The Democrats believed that 1868 was a big flop, that they can't wrap their arms around racism and hate and the old way of things, that they have to get on with it in a sense and open the tent a little bit and really talk about republicanism and the 10th Amendment and local control and not really talk about, trying to strip African Americans from their liberty and such like that. So they're gonna kind of look the other way and go, okay, we're gonna go with Horace Greeley, because at least he's not Ulysses S. Grant. So we only have two real major candidates here. The Democrats are siding again with the liberal Republicans. We have Ulysses on the ticket, of course, and now we're going to have one nasty campaign. So let's start off by saying that Horace Greeley is a horrible candidate. He's not a great campaigner. There's not really a coherent strategy to go after Grant, and there is ammunition because of the scandals, and there's a lot of anti-Grant sentiment. But Horace Greeley, his biggest problem is that he had stood on pretty much both sides of tons of issues as the editor of the New York Herald. He's associated with lots of flamboyant people. Mark Twain, Karl Marx was the European editor for the New York Herald. He hung out with P.T. Barnum. He had started a utopian community, and he has, a stance pretty much on everything, everywhere. So that's really going to come back to bite him in 1872 in this campaign. And Grant has the Momo. He's probably the best funded campaign up to that point in American history. He's got Henry Hilton of the Hilton fortune behind him, John Astor, the millionaire from New York. The Vanderbilts are throwing money at him, and he's using that money and the cartoon skills of Thomas Nast really to attack and portray himself as the hero of the Civil War, that it's too early to end military occupation of the South, and they're portraying Horace Greeley. There were cartoons that showed him shaking hands with John Wilkes Booth, over Abraham Lincoln's grave. There were cartoons of him coming up with bail money to get Jefferson Davis off the hook, the ex-president of the Confederacy. Now, they are talking about amnesty for ex-Confederates, but they're seeing it in the light of the Constitution and republicanism, and they're being portrayed as being, in bed with the KKK and all of those racists. So the campaign is really, really nasty. And really what's going to occur at the end of the campaign are things are going to turn horribly bad for Horace. Right before the election, at the end of October, his wife Mary passed away. And when he sees those results, he's not going to be around much longer either. He's not even going to make it till they count the electors. How about that? Why don't we get excited, because we're going to look at the big map. You want to see the map? I'm going to show you the map. Before we show you the big board, guys, I'm going to warn you, it's going to look a little bit funny. It's all cut up and carved up, and there's all these funny names on there, because Horace Greeley died. His wife died on October 30th. He's got less than a month himself, November 29th, only a few weeks after Election Day. He's going to pass away, so electors aren't going to be able to give their state's votes to Horace Greeley because he's not alive anymore, even though 3 from Georgia were like, we're voting for the dead guy anyway. But at the end of the day, if we pretend he's alive, so we can see that Grant pretty easily is going to beat Horace Greeley. He's going to rack up 31 states with a total of 286 electoral votes. If Horace was alive, he would have got 66 electoral votes. He won 6 states: Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, Tennessee, Texas, and Georgia. In terms of the popular vote, we have about 6.5 million people voting. Grant's going to win about 3.6 million of that. That works out to be about 55%. Horace racking up about 44%. We have to remember that this still is radical republicanism. Those ex-Confederates are not voting, and there's hundreds of thousands of African Americans that are voting in the South. That's so important to say. African Americans are voting in the South. African American men. Women aren't voting yet. They're voting in Wyoming. 1869, women got to vote. So it's the first election that women are casting votes for the president. It's coming, it's coming. Not soon enough. All right, giddy up for the learning, guys. We hope that you understand something about the 1872 election and the re-election of the very corrupt Ulysses S. Grant administration. We'll see what happens in 1876. Maybe they're going to end Reconstruction then. I guess you're going to have to wait and see. Check out the description below where we have a link to the playlist for all of the elections that we've done. We're getting so close. There's like 3 left. I can't wait till I'm done. So I say it at the end of every lecture, guys, because I mean it with all my heart. Where attention goes, energy flows. We'll see you guys next time that you press my buttons. Subscribe. You should do that too.